Anyone here for the first time? Awesome. Hey guys. Hey. Welcome. Are we good, Clayla? We're good. Okay. Hey everybody. My name's Mark. I'm one of the students here. I've been involved since 2009, so not too long. I've been asked to help out today. We have every Sunday. We have from 11 to 12. We've been having for a long time now a group an open meditation session, and we'll get to that. For all of you who came out for yoga, one of our new things, that's awesome. Yoga's great. I hope you guys enjoyed it. On the first Sundays of the month, usually Ann and Harvey are here. They weren't available this month, and they are here to give some kind of quick bit reflection for about 20, 30 minutes. And I've been asked to step in to do that. They gave me some vague instructions to reflect on, going from suffering to compassion and caring about others. And in my usual style, I thought about it for a while and wrote up probably like 3 hours worth of notes. So I have to kind of pick and choose. So I'm going to try to be a little bit traditional, a little bit honest and reflective about what traditionally what I've come across in my practice and my stuff I've learned over the last few years in traditional setting and just kind of in life on that. So I'd like to start a little bit, because this is a little bit of an educational stuff, with what suffering means in a traditional Buddhist sense, in case you're interested. I don't know, maybe, hopefully. So suffering comes up a lot in Buddhism. It usually starts, you may have heard of like the Four Noble Truths, is kind of like the first teaching that the Buddha ever gave. It's pretty important to the kind of the narrative of Buddhism, the basic philosophy that we find in all different Buddhist schools. And the first is dukkha, or suffering. Dukkha is translated a lot of different ways. It can be translated as suffering, as dissatisfaction, the inability to really rest and find something that we can rely on in a way. And it can be everything from the pain of getting your toes stubbed to really just wallowing around your whole life with our bad habits, our kind of our incomplete ways of dealing with stress. And they also, in a traditional sense, we'd also talk about going from life to life. So if you jump on the idea of rebirth and karma, then that kind of continues for a while, kind of infinitely. There's also comes up the idea that we talk about suffering in terms of the 3 marks of existence. That's something where there's 3 labels for what kind of. There's a book called What Makes You Not a Buddhist. It's a pretty honest book about talking about the kind of the fundamental things that you might assume if you're a Buddhist, a traditional Buddhist. The 3 marks are that everything compounded is impermanent, that it's always changing in some way. What we mean by compounded, anything that relies on multiple parts, so like a table with chair, a table with the legs, and the legs on down to atoms, and compounded in the sense of how we create things in our mind. Everything is, the way that we create our reality of understanding a thing is actually kind of a process, and it's not perfect. And so everything compounded is impermanent. Based on that, everything is, in a sense, we can't rely on at its deepest core. And then from there's also talking about no self, and we won't get to so much about that. That's kind of a complicated thing unto itself. We also spend a lot of time kind of meditating on it for a lot of different reasons in a traditional sense. Usually a lot of traditional teachers will start out talking about the fundamental core of Buddhism is to see that everyone, that we all want happiness, but we all usually don't know how to get it, and we usually end up giving ourselves suffering. That's a common starter line. There's a lot of kind of things to unpack with that. Let me pull up my notes here. We need to really explore suffering in order to make use of it. A lot of our lives we're looking for something that makes us happy in some capacity, either in the short run or in the long run, something that we're looking forward to the end of the day, kind of the end of the work week. We're looking forward to something meaningful in our lives, and we're trying to avoid painful suffering, and that's totally legitimate. That's something that we use to get through the day. It's how we get through our life, how we structure our life. It's something that we can. Sorry, I had a brain fart. It's one of those mornings. Let me get back to my thought here. Let me take a step back. Sorry, guys. Actually, here. Sorry, guys. It's one of those mornings. I had a bad week, and so we have to have a little space, and we'll get to that too. So, some people might, one reason we might come here to meditate might be because we've heard that it can be helpful, that it can help us get some bliss. It might, we come here, we sit, we find some peace, and it's very good. And in a way, it's almost like we're coming here to get blissed out. That's fair. We do that with a lot of things in our life. We're looking to find like a safe haven. And that's a fair thing, but we also need to explore the ways that we have suffering in our lives. There's a traditional story of the way that they talk about that you can either go, if you find that the world is painful, that the world is covered in thorns, you can either make a huge blanket that covers the whole world with a huge leather blanket that covers the whole world, or you could put shoes of leather on, and that will protect your feet from the leather thorns. We need to be able to explore how we suffer in ourselves, and we can actually, by exploring it, we can actually kind of unravel it. The fundamental way that we understand suffering in Buddhism is that it's actually kind of like a knot. It's a knot of our own potential, and it's kind of in that the suffering itself, the things that lead to suffering, are themselves pure, and actually if we can look at them a certain way, if we can understand them in a certain way, if we can unravel them, are actually enlightenment in of itself, is peace. It's not that we necessarily need to destroy it or to kind of but if we can unravel it and see it in a certain way, and by exploring it, we can actually gain some peace from it. That's one of the ways, and that's one of the main emphasis of meditation in Buddhism, is that we're not here necessarily just to create a peaceful state. And that's fair, that comes of it. But through the process of unraveling and spending time with ourselves, with how we suffer, we can actually gain some space. And that process itself isn't destroying, or isn't necessarily just destroying suffering, but it's actually unraveling it and letting the natural things behind suffering to express themselves as peace. And that's our potential. From a traditional sense, there's kind of three ways that we deal with suffering. The Tibetan Buddhist path talks about it. There's kind of three levels. One is through Buddhist practice, through meditation, through discipline, through taking up vows, we might, in a way, create barriers to avoid the things that lead to suffering. We take up virtuous practices. We engage in things that we know will keep us from getting involved with habit patterns or kind of things like drinking or smoking. There's some traditional list of things of taking lives, or of lying, stealing, things that might lead to us getting stuck in sticky situations, of painful situations, socially or otherwise. The other, so there's a lot of sense of developing peace, meditation, of space, of good qualities, in order to avoid us even kind of getting involved in them. That's something that we can do, and we're doing explicitly when we're going to do our meditation together here at 11. Another step, actually, in the Mahayana tradition, something that we talk about if you've heard about taking up the bodhisattva path of taking on the idea that we need to strive for enlightenment for other people. There's another big kind of important step that we take of actually seeking to create antidotes. If we're doing one thing, we kind of, if you've seen a wrestler, if someone is trying to pin you, there's some move where you can take someone's energy and kind of twist it into actually pinning them down. It's almost kind of working skillfully with something that's going on. I'm not into sports. I'm not into wrestling, so I apologize. I don't know how to describe it better than that. But I think y'all know what I'm talking about. So there's a sense of creating antidotes to problems that we can create. That we can find ways in suffering. That we can create ways of kind of working with suffering, and in a way finding an opposite way of kind of working with suffering and turning it into something positive. The deeper way, and we talk about in Tantric Buddhism, things like when we meditate on the Buddhas up here, that we actually see what I was saying earlier, is that we find the true nature of suffering, of that every aspect of what leads us to suffering, the suffering itself, in a way, is actually an enlightened quality, and in some way speaks to our true self, and is in a way is kind of, it's also like alchemy, is how they describe it. So, in a traditional sense, when we work with suffering, we spend a lot of time on it. In Tantric Practice Enigma, a book that one of our teachers, Kitsen Rinpoche, he spends a lot of time, actually about a quarter of the book, thinking about all the ways that we suffer. So we spend a lot of time actually sitting in it. We're not running away from it. Part of just talking about it and sitting with it it's important that we, when we're working with suffering, that we explore our own natural qualities of peace, of compassion, tenderness, of curiosity, of leaving space to work with it. These things are very important. I think it's actually summed up pretty well by these three Buddhas over here. Manjushri on the left is wisdom. He holds the sword of wisdom that cuts through ignorance. He has kind of like the nature of curiosity. We need to be curious. We actually need to explore and sit with and actually try to think about and make use of learning from our suffering. Avalokiteshvara in the middle is the Buddha of compassion. We need to be tender. We need to leave space. We need to actually think through and leave space to have a little bit of compassion for ourselves. I mean, if we can't have compassion for ourselves, we'll keep judging ourselves. We'll keep getting stuck in overreacting. And then Vajrapani on the right, he looks pretty fearsome. He's the Buddha of power, and that we really need to have the power to be stable and to leave space and to explore these things. He spends a quarter of the book going through talking about all the ways that we suffer. We suffer in birth and aging and dying and being sick. We can, all other beings suffer, and little animals suffer, the beings in hell suffer, even the gods suffer in some way by their own pride. In a way, the whole point of when he's talking about it it's kind of a reflexive. It's to actually increase our ability to leave space for what we would be a way to sit in other people's shoes, to create the ability to kind of to see things from other people's perspectives. It's important that we develop that skill. To see the suffering in ourselves, so that we can share it with other, so that we can see other people's suffering, and we can be open to being that we can be inspired by other people's sufferings. Sorry guys. That we can. Let me back up. Actually, sorry. We need to be able to see other people's sufferings as much as we can see ourselves suffering. If we can hold other people's sorry, I'm losing my words, guys. It's one of those days. If we can, the whole point is that if we need to be able to develop the capacity to be almost like a referee for ourselves. As much as we suffer, other people suffer. We need to be able to, sometimes some of us get stuck in the ability of we care about other people, but we don't care about ourselves. We need to be able to as much as one thing that we might do in therapy, actually, that I've learned is if someone is berating themselves, is hating themselves, oh, I really got stuck in judging myself. Well, what would a friend, what if your friend came on? How would they from an outside perspective, how would they help you out? They'd say, well, usually people can kind of guess, well, if my friend was going through this, I'd say, that's okay. We need to have, you can have some compassion. You need to have some space for yourself. We need to be able to learn to do that for other people as much as we do for ourselves. When we sit with suffering in ourselves, we can get really lost in sometimes in getting embedded in it. We can sometimes we get stuck in seeing and really kind of feeding into the lies that we tell ourselves. When we sit with compassion and we give ourselves the qualities that we develop in meditation of space, of compassion, tenderness, and curiosity, we can really let that give some space to kind of unravel the stories we tell ourselves that we get stuck in. I've had patients that they spend their whole lives running away from the ability to connect to other people. They learned early on that that they had an overwhelming, in their childhood their parents weren't around to really teach them how to give space, to hold, to really nourish them, to teach them how to deal with their own stress, to really think through things. And so one of the ways that they deal with that is they say that the world is out to get me. I can only rely on myself. I don't find, relating to my parents, therefore other people, I can't find solace in being connected with other people. So they go around telling themselves, it's me against the world. It's I am a rock, I am an island. And so so they'll go their whole life, it's being paranoid, being stuck in that, being stuck in that. Some people go through their whole life with the idea that that they're being judged by the people, and they don't take time to really sit back and investigate. Yes, sometimes my family did judge me, but I didn't give myself space to see that. That's not always true. That some people really are supportive, and we tell ourselves narratives that we get stuck in. That if we allow ourselves space to really sit back and reflect, and we say, what would other people, how would other people treat me? Is this really true? To really investigate, to actually sit with some curiosity. Maybe there's times that this isn't true. I had a friend who actually was supportive, and we can actually allow those things to unravel that suffering. I know that probably didn't make a lot of sense. I apologize, guys. Let me think here for a second to see if there's anything else that I really wanted to say. So how does suffering support compassion and support the sense of caring about others? I touched in a very roundabout way that we need to develop the ability to kind of be a referee for ourselves and for other people. We need to leave space to see that we ourselves suffer, and we need to have some compassion for ourselves. Equally, another very important thing that that Buddhism mentions and that really focuses on is we develop compassion by saying that we're all equal, and that we all suffer, and that we all basically share in that fundamental struggle for seeking happiness and for trying to avoid suffering. It's a difficult thing. In Western culture, we kind of have a mercantilism of caring about others. It's kind of a different thought that we say. In Buddhism, we'd say because we all share that fundamental humanity of suffering, we should actually feel an equalness with everyone. We don't really share that. That's not really a thing. In Southern culture, we're taught to be genteel. We're taught to be kind to each other, to open the door. That's one thing. But in general, there's a sense of there's a specialness. If we share our love with people who aren't close to us, we're almost denigrating that compassion or that love. So it's a different kind of thought. We need to be able to. It's kind of a challenge in a way to challenge this self-centeredness that we don't have a lot to share. A lot of time that we spend thinking about compassion is saying, may all beings have happiness. May I care about every single being. May I help everybody get to enlightenment. May I share may I give up all of my good things. And that's kind of scary in a way. We're almost like denigrating ourselves. We're almost it almost feels like too much. We might almost say, I can only care about so many people in my lives. I can barely care about myself. So and we can get stuck in almost creating like a false self, or reinforcing or reinforcing that kind of fear of actually opening up. An important thing when we're thinking in those terms of infiniteness is it's almost like working out. We're expanding. We're trying to expand how far we can open ourselves up. The idea is that our mind is actually infinite, and that our compassion can be infinite, and that slowly, if we kind of expand the boundaries a little bit further than we want, we can actually slowly open ourselves up more and more. The fundamental idea is that ultimately we can get there, but we We need to be honest with ourselves. If we really are shutting off and that sense of infiniteness is overwhelming, then we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be tender. We need to be compassionate with ourselves. We can't push ourselves too far. Before we switch over to the meditation, I just wanted to reflect on how compassion and suffering can really be picked up in silent sitting meditation. So we're going to be sitting here for a few minutes, and I'll get into the logistics here. We really can be working with suffering and creating compassion for ourselves, especially implicitly for others, just in the process of meditating. We're going to be asked to do something, and it's pretty much near impossible to do it perfectly. It's just guaranteed. We're asked to sit calmly and to sit non-judgmentally, focusing on one thing. It's not going to be possible to have your concentration stay there forever. We're going to get distracted. And probably what's going to happen when you get distracted, you're going to, for me at least, I know that for me, what happens is, you're bad. You got to get back. And you're like, crap. And you get back real quickly. And you jump very quickly. And you create a habit pattern out of that. And there's a chance, what we're asked to do actually is to leave some space, to leave a space to reflect on, to let that thought kind of peter out. And then not to judge yourself. If you judge yourself, watch it. See what that means. Watch it. Leave space for how powerful that judgment is. And then as that fades, then you go back tenderly with compassion back to the object. It's a chance to see how much we attack ourselves. It's a chance to see how much we get stuck in the stories that we tell ourselves. And just by opening up and leaving space, it gives us a chance to actually touch into the natural qualities that we're developing with openness, with attention, with spaciousness. Mindfulness itself kind of implies actually not just this attention and awareness, but actually there's a lot of qualities that come with it. Compassion is one of them. And it's something that we're implicitly, that if we generate for ourselves, eventually we can share with the rest of the world. So I know that was a pretty, I can feel that I kind of jumped around a lot, and I apologize for that. Just sitting here, I'll give an example. Right now I feel a little overwhelmed by what I did. And my natural instinct would be to kind of shut off, to make apologies, but I'm just naturally feeling it through the body. There's some waves of judgment, maybe some tension in my body, but I can feel it kind of moving. I can feel it. There's some sense of it kind of dissipating. The tension is kind of moving through my chest. It's moving down. Maybe a thought comes up of, oh, well, you're not very good. It comes, it goes. And then there's kind of like a space. There's a little bit of freedom right there. So, okay. So it's a few minutes before 11. I'm not going to talk a lot more. Does anybody have anything that they want to say? We won't pass around the mic. I'll repeat it into my mic.
Thank you, Mark, for the talk, and I found it very touching and useful.
Sorry, yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'll say it, Clara. So we had a comment.
I just told Mark that I thought what he shared was very useful and practical, and thanked him for being present to do it for us.
Sure.
No judging.
Okay.
Thank you once again. Could you explain the difference between suffering and pain?
That's a good point. That in the 3-hour talk would have been very clear.
No, you did great for the 30 minutes. But can you kind of discern the difference, because
Yeah.
one seems unavoidable and the other one seems unavoidable. But I mean,
Yeah.
how do you discern between the two?
So this book I would recommend for all people who are not in a traditional sense. It's called The Buddha's Brain. It does an honest job of being honest neuroscience, honest Western psychology, and honest Buddhism all at the same time. He talks about the two darts. There's the inevitable pain. We're going to stub our toe. We are all in this room going to have a profound loss. We're all going to die. We're all going to have to let go of things that we really care about. And how we deal with it, and the ways that we've seen other people model working through it, the ways that we've put together to deal with those stresses are usually imperfect in some way. And those things are learned; they're not permanent, and we can investigate them. And through leaving space, and through exploration, and through guidance to other people, we can let go of some of our habit patterns. And a lot of them, unfortunately, we get really stuck in, and they're very not fresh, and they're very repetitive, and they're very kind of same old. And so a lot of our life actually is spent in that second suffering. We have all kinds of fresh kinds of new problems every day. We have all kinds of new things that come up. One bug bite is uniquely different from any other one, and it's a unique experience. And if we could feel all the ways that pain dances around, or that pain in your shoulder moves around, it's uniquely different and in some way interesting, if not painful. But we kind of fall into repetitive stories that we tell ourselves about how we, repetitive stories about who we are, about who other people are to us, about we learn ways of repetitive behaviors about how to get through things from mine. And when I get too stressed, I go back and I play Civ 4 or Civ 5 for like an hour, or sometimes like 8. And I narcotize myself, or I feel better by yelling at something to cover up that. But those things are fundamentally not as interesting, and are repetitive, and not as flexible. And so that's where a lot of our pain comes from.
But how do you avoid pain versus avoid suffering? I mean, is there any, in Buddhism, isn't there a distinction between those two, or?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. I mean,
Can you define the difference between the two for me?
So pain is so there's 5 levels of who we are. There's the 5 aggregates of self. There's the physical forms and sensations and raw data that comes at us through our body or our senses. There's the quick, every second we're having that's good, that's bad, or that's negative. Then there's a quick kind of like pre-verbal like sense about what things are, even verbal. There's kind of like intentions, movements, kind of general reactive patterns, and there's consciousness itself. Pain is probably, you could say, is like, oh, that's bad. It's a momentary thing. There may be things that are happening to you that last, like a bug bite, a bad back, a broken leg, that are going to have multiple moments over and over again of a painful experience. So yeah, there's pain, but at the from the highest of views, that momentary experience is itself is in a way enlightenment, and is one of the 5 Buddhas when we talk about the 5 Buddha families. So we don't see it that way, and that's pretty damn near impossible to appreciate when you're when you're sitting there after a surgery and you're in pain, and you're in pain and your drugs aren't working. You can't really see it that way, but there's some comfort in knowing that in a way. So that's what pain would be. It's a bunch of momentary. There's sensations. There's the physical sensation, a tingling, a movement. There's pressure. There's lightness, hot, cold, something, and then everything beyond that is our reaction to it. And there's the momentary judgment about it. There's our long-term stories about how we get stuck in things. There's waves of all different frequencies. Short-term frequency that lasts a blip, and long-term frequencies that last lifetimes. That would be suffering.
So pain is unavoidable. Can you use the mic? So pain is unavoidable, and suffering is optional. Is that kind of how we're thinking about this? Okay.
Yeah. And suffering. What's nice is a lot of teachers say that suffering is usually is kind of like a self-reinforced loop. Every moment, the suffering itself, there's those frequencies. The suffering are patterns that themselves are impermanent too. You know, they usually reinforce themselves if we give them just enough attention, but not enough to really explore them with a little bit of tenderness, spaciousness, curiosity, force. You know, with those three qualities, they'll keep recreating themselves, and we'll keep letting themselves recreate themselves. But once we give them enough investigation, with enough tenderness, curiosity, and space, if we can really, rather than letting them. Kind of like a dog sled. If they grab onto you and pull you down, if we let the dog kind of, if we give the dog some space to kind of run around, we watch it and it'll kind of poop out eventually. That'll happen. Yeah. Yeah. So that event that can happen with all of our sufferings too. They're not permanent, and they usually reinforce themselves if we don't investigate them enough. And that's one of the things that if we can investigate our own problems, we can then eventually learn to help other people do it too. That's the ultimate goal. Last question.
Hello, I'm Edwin.
Hey, Edwin.
I'm Yogi Edwin. My friend and I, Maria, we drove from Bowman to drove here. I'm very grateful for your lesson. You gave a truly this description of suffering, discomfort, and pain without you knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
So it takes a lot of humility to sit there.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of humility to go into your Buddha nature.
Mm-hmm.
And to sit there and to open. So you were open. The whole lesson you were saying, it was not you speaking. It was divinity through you. So I love it because you went through and then you apologized, but it was the perfect example of discomfort, and you just rode through it, and you came back to your center, to the center of your heart.
Yeah.
And you spoke from there, and we all love it. And the lesson was perfect because I had my inner ears open and my divine intention
Good.
to be here for you. But I'm so grateful that I finally made it here, and thank you for my friend Maria that drove here. So I bless you, and Namaste you, a little Buddha.
Thank you.
Tiny
Thank you.
Buddha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a good example of what Harvey says. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Don't bite off more than you can chew. So let's transition now to the 11 o'clock hour. So welcome everyone. I'll start over again for those who are jumping in. Okay, so I'm going to let them switch over. Who's here for the first time? You guys?